Thank you, Zoom. I appreciate it. Did you hear that? It say that?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm Israeli.
Hi, I'm Mohammad and I'm Palestinian.
I was born in America, and I was, raised here. But my grandfather was in one of the first refugee boats over to Israel when it was first being made from a refugee camp in Poland, where he was born. And my grandmother came from Romania, and she was escaping the firing death squads to come to Israel. And my father and his siblings were all born in Israel, and my family still lives there.
Yeah, and I was actually born in New York in Queens, and I went back to Palestine and lived there till I was about 8 or 9 years old. And then I came back in the middle of America in Kansas City. So
That's a little far from New York.
yeah,
It must have been like a huge difference. Like, well, I got New York and now Kansas.
yeah, it's completely different.
So we wanted to do this conversation so that y'all could actually hear experience of people who actually live there or have family there or have actual experience there, because right now there's way too many people speaking over us who've done like an hour of research on this entire thing. And whilst the thing that's happening right now, this current situation's pretty cut and dry, there's a very clear imbalance of power and has been for a while. We're constantly getting spoken over, and also our emotional labor is getting demanded. And we're like, yo, it's gonna take more than 2.5 seconds to talk about this topic. You're gonna have to like let people do it and do research and everything. So
Yeah, and I think there's weight to that. Lived experiences from both sides matter way more than any, politician or any opinion of an internet warrior that thinks they know everything. Seeing things in firsthand, first person is always going to outweigh all that other stuff. So, um, our goal is to better understand each other, the situation happening in Israel and Palestine, and to ultimately provide that brings solutions to the table for the future.
yeah, and we have known each other for a while, and we respect each other as humans above anything else. We have never let the fact that the government's in charge of countries where our family calls home, change any of that. And we want to be able to understand each other's experiences, because I don't have any experience on the Palestinian side of things.
Yeah, same here. I want, I've already, from the talks that we've already had, I've already learned a few things that I didn't know, especially, just getting the perspective of someone that was directly affected by the creation of Israel, on the other side of it, like you and your family. So um, I think we're just kind of sick of the performative activists that we're dealing with these days. And although, as a Palestinian, I do want to say I really appreciate everything I've seen on social media and all the support that we've gotten. I've always kind of shied away from posting too many things just because people will kind of see it as just another Palestinian pushing their own agenda. So the fact that other people are doing it does make a big difference, and I want to make sure people understand that.
Yeah, and from an Israeli perspective, 100%, it is 1000% necessary to criticize the Israeli government. It is 100% important to call out what is happening in Israel as a whole, in Palestine as a whole. It's very important to do that. But with the influx of what people are posting right now, people aren't fact checking. And that's becoming really harmful, because there's tons of propaganda being spread on both sides. Because I am Israeli, I am Jewish, I see all sides of what everyone's posting from this. I see the misinformation on every single side of it. And I'm like, if y'all would take more than 5 minutes to actually research even the infographic you're trying to spread, you would stop the spread of misinformation, the spread of Islamophobia, the spread of anti-Semitism, instead of actually critiquing a government that needs to be critiqued. Like, I am literally Israeli. My family literally lives there. And I 100% acknowledge the imbalance of power. I 100% acknowledge that the Israeli government needs to be criticized. But I can't be sharing half the shit y'all are, because of all the inherent anti Semitism and the anti Semitic tropes that are bleeding within this info. And I'm like, most of this information is completely correct. Most of this information is incredibly important to get out there. But then there's one slide that says Israel only picked that area because of oil. No, that's not at all true. And there's so much being spread, and people are just trying to look more woke, and they're demanding people speak without actually doing any research themselves. They're literally just like, and the thing is they're harassing Jews and Palestinians and Israelis and Muslims, period. Like, they're demanding we speak, but they don't go to every single person they assume is Chinese and demand them speak on their government, do they? They don't go to every single American. They don't go to every single British person and be like, oh, think that answer for the crimes of the UK government. For some reason, people tend to focus on this one and demand emotional labor from those of us involved.
Absolutely. That's actually a big point. For some reason, the entire world feels entitled to us and to our situation, which I mean is kind of humbling, but is also a little troubling because we always get drowned. Our voices get drowned out by the other people, and that's literally the point of this discussion that me and Danielle are having. Is basically to just say we don't want the other people talking over us anymore. We kind of just want to focus this and make sure that we make our message clear. Me and Danielle, just a quick background. I mean, we've known each other for a while. I would say ever since I was how old? Like
It
6.
was, I think it was 2013 we met.
Yeah. So
Wow.
so that's what, like
8 years.
8 years, right?
Ah.
And the fact that a Palestinian and an Israeli, could become friends. It's just telling you that what you're seeing on the media and all this crap is pretty much crap.
It's extremist sensationalism. That's what
Yeah,
y'all are seeing. That's all y'all are getting fed from every single side.
it's the same
They
thing that
hate them. They hate them.
it's the same thing they're dealing with here. It's really frustrating now when you have a point you want to get across, but people are just taking the really cheap route of, saying you're bad, I hate you, I want to kill you, I hope that you're wiped off the earth. These sort of things don't really do much for us. In fact, they're actually, detrimental to what we're trying to do for the future, because we're not trying to look back at the history of things and, say, well, this is where this one went wrong and this one went wrong, and, how are we going to make it right? No, we're trying to just make it right on the current state of things, because it's 2021, and we have to be visionaries with our perspective. We need to look forward. We have to fix this. As a millennial, I mean, millennials, in my opinion,
We're zillennials. Let's get technical.
whatever. We're pretty much kind of tasked with being the mature adults in the room here, and trying to figure out a feasible solution. So that's what we're going to try to do today. It's really hard. There's so many things to go over. So we're going to try to, keep
Yes.
it in line.
And we, above all, are going to be listening to each other and giving each other the space to speak, because my experiences don't dismiss his, and his experiences don't dismiss mine. More than one thing can be true, and more than one thing can be bad at once. And that's the crux of this. And there is no excusing of the things that have happened up until this point that will be happening. But it is important to understand that there is so much involved in this. Yes, human rights violations are pretty clear cut. There's no doubt about that. There's no, that's not up for debate in any way, shape, or form. And if you feel like there is, I'm talking directly to you. That is not up for debate. The fact is, though, is that there's so much we can and should be doing now instead of this. But this is what's happening.
So let's go ahead and start with the current state of things. So Danielle, you actually kept making this point when we were talking, was the clear imbalance of power. And it wasn't always that way. And eventually it kind of got to this point where Israel literally became the very monster they set out to destroy. What do you think about that?
So what my point there was is that essentially there is a point, and the Americans love to spout this, especially the ones who have no stake in the game. Israel has a right to defend herself. It's true. But when does that defense cross a line and become outright bullshit and offense? And you have to look at these things. Somebody said in the most poignant quote I think I have seen, and honestly, it broke me for a second. It said, yes, the Israelis are hiding in bomb shelters, and that's terrifying. Palestine doesn't even have bomb shelters. Israel has the Iron Dome, which is brilliant in theory. It's great. And in practice, it's great. Palestine doesn't. And not only, instead of just using the Iron Dome, Israel will throw how many rockets at Hamas? Now, let's be very fucking clear. Hamas intentionally goes where they go. They are intentionally doing that. And with them trying to kill Israelis is completely unconscionable. But there gets to be a point where it's no longer defense. It's crossing a line. It's becoming literal murder of children and civilians. And it's so complex that people just don't really understand.
Yeah, there is one thing, I think me and you kind of would disagree on, because I don't know enough about Hamas to be really frank with you. And disclaimer, I am not representing, the entirety of Palestinian people. This is just one man's opinion. But Hamas to me have never really been that good at hiding, or that good at, I don't know if they would necessarily go and use, civilian locations on purpose. Maybe they do in certain, instances. But for me, the root of that problem comes from this is something we were going to touch on later, but it's the Israeli, sort of media propaganda that they sort of push, right? It's hey, they do all these crazy evil things. I can't even, tell you the list of the things that I see people online just put, and I'm like, where do you even get this sort of stuff? But I don't, I am not with Hamas. I do not support Hamas, period. So don't ever misconstrue anything I say on that. But the problem here is, Israel targets soft spots in certain moments, right? So we're going to kind of get into the main current state of things here. So what the problem here is, Israel is very, very smart. I want people to understand how intelligent this country is when it comes to their strategy, when it comes to their cyber security intelligence. And Danielle, you mentioned, I don't know if you want to bring this up or not, when it comes to the development of that and the history of it. Um, Sorry.
Basically, there were entire IDF units made to help start the information security branch of the Israeli military. My father was absolutely involved. He is a nerd, so he didn't see that much combat. As for what that much actually means, I'm not sure. But he helped build the infrastructure, the original information security for the IDF. It has since been 100% fortified and upgraded and everything, but he was one of the people who was first like, hey, this is how we protect our information and everything, which also leads to the other point that I think this was news to you when I told you the IDF requires service. It is required or you go to prison. And I don't know if you know what IDF prisons are like, but it's required. And so most people, not everybody sees combat. The people who do, but there's a lot of people who don't, but it is required. It is required. You're drafted. Everybody is taught. I think it starts at 18, and I think girls are required 2 years, boys are required 3, And there are obviously exceptions, just like there are when there was the draft here. But basically, everybody is required to serve and participate in some way. And because of the way that the IDF has since worked with Mossad and definitely the US to increase their intelligence and increase their level of security, Israel is one of the smartest and strongest nations in all of existence. And I remember in Hebrew school that I used to go around proudly saying, yeah, whoever starts a war with Israel next is going to lose. Whichever side Israel's on in the next world war is going to win, which is true, but that's because who's on Israel's side?
It's America.
Exactly. So it's America that's going to win. Because the fact of the matter is the crux of this issue is that the Israeli government is backed by the US and was founded by the UK. And they only care about their own self-interest, and they're propping up the right wing. We just had this issue here. Bernie just posted an article about it on the New York Times saying, we just saw this happen here. We see it happen everywhere when the right-wing nationalists get in charge and turn everything to even worse shit. That's what's happening here. The right-wing people are in charge. They're the extremists. They're pushing these false narratives. They're pushing these racist narratives, and they're getting more right-wing people involved. And the thing is from my point of view, Israel did what they did when they did on purpose in order to get retaliation from Hamas. They didn't want any of their people to die, of course. I don't think they really cared that much who did, but they're like, we have an Iron Dome. We're fine. We'll just bomb them back. They were intentionally increasing and escalating because they were just about to have another election. And guess what that election was going to do? Finally have an Arab Muslim, I don't know if they were Palestinian, but somebody who is not just, so they were actually going to have an Arab on the Knesset, and they were actually in representation. And the right wing was like, nope, that ain't happening. I'm not going to be on government with them. Because what is nationalism if not racism completely? Like, at the end of the day, they didn't want to even take one step in improving things. They didn't want to take one step in de-escalation. They said, we are going to get Hamas to attack so that we can attack them back. And in this instance, that's exactly what happened. And historically, that's not always the case, but in this case, and a lot of the times where there's peace, even on the horizon, someone will take a step and be like,
That's so powerful for you to even say that. The polarities, this whole epidemic, if you may, of polarities between just having political affiliations and bullshit, like you mentioned, is really the problem here. And you bring up something very interesting, which I actually didn't think too much about until you brought it up when we spoke, which was sort of the election process that's happening in Israel and the prime minister with Netanyahu. He is a far right. I would say, he is an extremist to me as a Palestinian, and he's someone that has incited so much violence against my people.
I love how you're mincing words. I'll just say it. Netanyahu is a piece of shit. Netanyahu is a disgusting piece of shit.
Yeah, and that's funny. I'm mincing words. You bring up that point too, is because as a Palestinian, I literally have no privilege to ever step out of line because anyone can use it against me. And I just want people to understand, like, we aren't bad people. But well, whatever. The point is, the election process in Israel, something funny has been going on with that. And how many terms has this guy served?
I think the last thing I saw said that he's on his 10th year. That's, I think, what Bernie said in the article. He's on his 10th year. I don't think there are term limits nearly the same as there are in America. There have only been, I think, 2 other prime ministers who have served this long. One of them being Ben Gurion, I think, who is the airport is named after. He's, important. Don't ask me Israeli history. I don't know. But he's on his 10th year. He is being investigated for corruption again. By the way, do not ask me what is happening to that investigation. I have no idea, and I'm sure there's no reason for that. Correct. They're literally heading into their 5th election in 2 years right now, which comes to the whole big thing. That's the biggest issue, that people are literally conflating Netanyahu and his right-wing extremists, a group of whom are called Proud Boys, by the way, for context. They're conflating them with all of the Israeli people when there are literally protests happening, and there have been for like ever. And they're literally trying to have another election right now. They have tried to get rid of him how many times in 2 years? And the right-wing extremism just keeps getting fueled and fueled and fueled. That's what's happening. And the problem is that I'm actually really pissed that I have to constantly keep reminding people of this. And this is like what my issue is with this entire thing, period. Like, for some reason, when the right wing is calling all Muslims, all Palestinians, all Arabs terrorists, which is unconscionable, everybody except, the right wingers are able to say you're wrong. Stop conflating them. That is not at all the case. Stop it. They're able to call it out. But the second now it gets turned on us, all Israelis, all Jews, all Zionists, when Zionism itself doesn't even mean that. Zionism itself just means the support of Jewish self-determination, existence of the nation of Israel, the state of Israel, a place where Jews can be openly Jewish and have federal laws protecting them. Because that's at the crux of the matter what it is. It's a return to our homeland, because this is where we were exiled from and stuck for how long in the diaspora? The diaspora, which literally comes from the movement of Jews around the world. They were so unsafe in the diaspora, they had to come home. And then there are the Jews who were already existing there, who were, living as second-class citizens. And then once the state of Israel happens, they turn around and do it to them. Like, the complexity is that the Jews were unsafe, found a place to try and be safe. And the people who decided to make that a thing, the UK and the US, they didn't care about what happened to everybody else who was already there. They were like, okay, ha ha ha. Because, and we're getting to this part, is like basically the history, the quick background is that Israel exists because of reparations from the Holocaust. And because of years and like millennia of anti-Semitism built up and built up and built up. And it was saying, we're giving Jews a place to have a home, but it's because they didn't want them. They didn't want to deal with the Jewish problem. They were like, here you go. And that's how it's always been. And it's like,
they pretend like they actually cared about the Jewish people.
And then the worst part is when Jews who are not affected by the diaspora in any way, the Jews who are like, I think the term that people use is assimilated. I don't know if that's the term I would use, but basically you have the right wing, the ultra-Orthodox, not all of them by any means, but there's a lot of ultra-Orthodox who are so super right-wing that they would rather align themselves with white supremacists because they would benefit from white supremacy if they weren't open, like very visibly Jewish, right? A lot of the time. So they align themselves with white supremacy instead of dealing with anything on that side. But then you have the left who's completely worried about their own white saviorism, the white Ashkis over there and all the leftist Jews who refuse to actually acknowledge anybody who actually exists outside of in the diaspora being affected by actually people whose lives actually were changed because of the existence and saved because of the existence of Israel, only to turn around and tokenize them later and use them as a pawn and be like, ha ha ha, look, I'm sharing this anti-Zionist view, I'm sharing this. And it's like, you guys are using the term wrong. The term has been weaponized by the right and has been weaponized by the Israeli government as well. And whilst it's really true that Jews have the ability to distance themselves and to be able to make the distinction and say there's a difference between believing that Israel has a right to exist and Jews have a right to be safe, and Palestinians cannot, because the way that Zionism has affected them is a completely different way, and it's been harmful and it's destroyed their home. It's true that I understand why Palestinians are anti-Zionist. But when people who are not affected by this, or when Jews who are not affected by this, when they step up and they dismiss the fact that this movement was started for decolonization, you're dismissing the validity of people who live there. And they're letting the weaponization of the word be a defining factor in pushing people further right. Because the more they demonize people who just believe Israel has a right to exist, the more those people are going to be like, you know what? Now I literally have to fight for my life. And they literally say we have no ties to the homeland. They literally say you shouldn't have a place to be safe. You have no right to self-determination. When really, it's like, no, we are not supporting the government. Just because the movement has been co-opted by the right-wing nut jobs does not mean that's what it is. American values has been co-opted by the right for how long? Does that mean that everyone who believes in like American values actually is racist? I mean, sometimes kind of, but like, like
No, you bring up a good point.
They don't even let us differentiate between the government and the people. They lump them together. And it's like, if you can differentiate Trumpies and Americans, why can't you do the same to Israelis? Like, why is it so hard?
This actually, I want to make sure we harp on this part, because I think this is the main issue that I want to bring awareness to, is the fact that, look, the Jewish people and the Palestinian people, they are very, in a way, closely related as a race. They are different, but they are closely related. We had been living in that land just as they had for who knows how long, okay? I mean, if you look at the Native American here, they were living off the land. It's just a very simple concept. If you have a village of people, a race of people, and they have ancestors there, they've been living off that land for so long. That's how that happens. It's makes perfect sense. That's what animals do. They find a place, it's good, they live there, and they continue to stay around that area. So it's not about who was there first and who left and who didn't come back. It's about making sure we differentiate the friends from the enemies. Who's the real enemy here? The enemy is the governments and the corruption of the governments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the Jewish people, the Israeli people, the Palestinian people, Muslims, Christians, and Jewish people, they are brothers and sisters. God meant for us to all be loving and to all have peace, okay? And these guys that come in from all parts of the world and think they can just pit us against each other and make us think that the only way out of this is an all-out war, which is the literal thing I'm trying my hardest to do as a Palestinian who lives in America. I'm trying so hard to avoid this future of just all-out war, because at the end of the day, my people will be annihilated. We have no army, we have no security. We're already getting killed, in a crazy rate, but it could be so much worse, because I already know what the military of Israel is capable of, because I've seen it firsthand with my own eyes. And the whole point here is we need to make sure that we stop this bullshit of hate towards each other, because it will get us nowhere.
It'll send us backwards even more.
Yes, all the people that have been killed, I would literally be doing a disservice to their memory if all I'm doing is continuing to spew the very hate that might have caused their death by the other side. So I'm not going to be a hypocrite in that manner. Okay. So I also want to, I kind of want to get into the current situation and from the Palestinian point of view. Because I just want people to kind of get a perspective of what I seen when I was there. The real problem here, guys, is people say, oh, well, why don't Palestinians just leave Israelis alone, or why don't they leave each other alone? Well, the problem is the Israeli government and their military have made it to where we can't move around our own country and our own towns without being harassed, without being checked, and without most of the time being turned back. So there's a lot of military checkpoints in every corner of Palestinian, highways and roads. There's always checkpoints with the IDF soldiers waiting there, and they're there to either impose their will, harass, make sure they're keeping security, whatever they want to justify it. Most of the time, it's just because they want to make sure that they keep us in line and keep us intimidated. our economy literally can't function because we have no way of transporting goods in a efficient manner, because they cut off all of our all of our efficient, ways to do that. Um, and the whole thing with the IDF that really pisses me off is they'll throw gas grenades, stun grenades. They'll come into towns, they'll rile us up, and then they'll leave. Why do they do these things? Because they want us to retaliate, so then they could come back with bigger guns and, bigger tanks and bigger, cars, whatever you want to call it, and literally F us up.
Yep.
This is the thing that I want people to understand about the whole struggle of this. Is people see on the news, Palestinians throwing rocks, or they're attacking, police cars that or police trucks of the Israeli, the IDF, and all these sorts of things, but they don't understand that these Palestinians literally get harassed day in and day out, while they literally have to watch as the IDF basically control their lives. And they know on the other side of these walls, there's literally an open society with a perfectly functioning economy, with rainbows and sunshine. Literally, I mean, it is kind of like that on the Israeli side, and I know Danielle will say that.
Two of my cousins literally posted photos of them at the beach today. You know what's happening on the beach of Gaza today?
Right. That's a perfect example. And so the other main problem here that I want people to understand is how would you feel, and how long would it take for you to just kind of be sick and tired of it, to where you'll feel like the only thing that makes sense is to resist and to kind of fight back in a way. And that's what we're doing. Although it doesn't make much of a difference, it does keep them at bay. And it actually blew my mind. I'm not much of a resilient fighter in terms of, like, if I see a tank, I'm not gonna go and face that tank, because rationally for me, I have to live to fight another day, and I have to make a difference a different way. But the Palestinian people are so resilient, and they have literally shown and proven to me how banding together will keep even the biggest evil army at bay. And that's literally what's been happening, is without the resistance and all those people that you call terrorists, without them, and by the way, when I say the people you call terrorists, I'm not referring to Hamas. I'm referring to the people that just get dressed up, put a mask on, and throw rocks, okay, or do something. Without them, we would literally, most of Palestine would already be gone, because Israel would just truck over us. So Danielle, you can jump in here if you want to.
My father was born in Israel, and I was raised hearing hatred of every single Arab in existence, and Muslim and Palestinian. He never even used the word Palestinian ever. Not once. Well, I mean, eventually, like, we taught him compassion. But he grew up in this culture of hatred, being told they want you dead. They want you dead. And yes, Hamas literally has in their charter, death to all Jews, blah, blah, whatever. That's not the point. The point is that he was told every single one bad. And so many people are growing up in this bubble because it's just hatred being stoked and stoked and stoked from all sides, and has since the beginning. And like, the Israel itself, the reason the Jews are indigenous is because the land originally called Canaan, then Judea, and all of that, the Jews were expelled. And then after that, the Romans, the ones who, killed Jesus, who was Jewish and looked like you with long hair and, long hair. And he literally, they decided to change the name of Judea to Palestine, or as Palestinians pronounce it,
Palestine,
which is very reminiscent of the ancient Philistines, which were known as Israel, the Israelites' biblical enemy, like it was known to be. So from the jump, we were told to hate each other. We have been told the entirety of our existence. We're siblings. We are the same. We are the same people. We Like literally, Islam was started by Abraham's son. We are the same. But instead, everybody always has to get involved and try to make us hate each other. They changed our name to the name of our enemy because they wanted us to no longer have a connection and to hate the people that live there, even though we were getting abused and anti-Semitized, that's not a word, but it is now, by everybody else in every country that we went to. The one place where we should have felt at home and weren't allowed to be in was immediately just turned into a, now they hate you. And now it has led to this and so much hatred, building upon hatred upon hatred upon hatred. And it's disgusting to see, because the civilians on the sides, on both, like, y'all hate the word both sides, but the fact is there are people on both sides who are suffering. The people, the civilians, they want peace. They want peace. That's why there are protests. There are Palestinians and Israelis working together and protesting Netanyahu and his government. And pre-COVID, you should have seen it. There was literally a protest in which they marked lines 6 feet apart to go protest, BB.
No media coverage.
None. Not a bit. Not a bit. Because the right wing will never show the Palestinians. The right wing, everywhere, don't show Palestinians. But will the left show the Israelis fighting the Israeli government? Never. Never.
How much fear would they have if Palestinians and Israeli citizens literally said, we don't need you, we'll do this ourselves? I mean, can you even imagine? That's what they're scared of, Danielle.
They're terrified. It's like the movie Bug's Life, when Hopper goes, they are more than us. If they band together and realize they can, we're done for. The whole speech he gave. It's brilliant. It's true. They became, instead of the civilians want to help each other and everyone wants to thrive and live with their neighbors, they turned it into a no, they all hate you. When in reality, it's just that the governments don't care about their people. Because the crux of the matter is, it is no longer I'm fighting for Jewish self-determination. I'm fighting to protect my people. No, it is now, fuck you, I want you dead. I want unrest.
And the thing is too, is like, as a Palestinian, you know, we can't go back. Okay, all of the citizens and the families that live in present day Israel, and all the families and citizens that live in present day Palestine, they're not going anywhere, guys. They're not going anywhere. So unless all the people that are saying, you know, just wipe the whole Israel thing off the map, what the hell do you expect to do with all those, you know, people that live in that part of the town and the land and the cities? And what can you possibly do except to be a hypocrite and to do to them what they have done to us, guys? This is what me as a Palestinian is telling the world. Now, this is where it gets tricky for me, because the illegal settlements, which is something I want to make sure we talk about, we might as well just talk about it now.
Yeah.
The illegal settlements, obviously, that can be handled in the future in a way where we can give those people back their homes that rightfully they should have back in their possession. But Israel itself, the people that live there, they're not all illegal settlements, but the ones that are illegal settlements need to be, you know, handled case by case and to be given back. And this is just talking future tense, obviously. But I want to make sure to explain this illegal settlement process. Okay, I would say, my opinion, 80% of the conflict always starts with IDF, which is the Israeli Defense Force. They pull up with some Israeli settlers. Literally, they bring them. They bring like normal people with them. And they say, hey, this home now is under our jurisdiction, get out, blah blah blah. Then they proceed to yank those people out. Literally the same day, they'll let those settlers go in, like while their furniture is still there. their kids' pictures are still there. Everything is still, imagine, literally, just like someone stealing your house. Literally, the meaning of stealing someone's house. This happens. This spreads through Palestinian networks, and people start to hear about it. People get really upset. People get really mad. Maybe a few Palestinian groups will come and they'll try to help out, or they'll do something to kind of resist against IDF. And the thing is, the IDF already know this is coming. They know that when they come and they proceed with this illegal settlement, they know there's going to be a reaction. So they're ready for that reaction already. And then when this reaction finishes between the two sides, then Israel proceeds to move on to a bigger reaction that they're waiting for, or that they initiate through some sort of what's the word when you egg someone on, or I don't.
Incitement.
Yeah, incitement. They incite more of this bullshit. And anytime Palestinians do something, they'll just meet them with even greater force. And this is what happened recently. We can touch on it a little bit. Is Sheikh Jarrah? I think I'm saying it right. It's the town that this is where it all started.
Yep. This time.
Yeah. Is it East Jerusalem, I think?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, so East Jerusalem, there's a town, people live there, perfectly legal. They live there, it's their home. There's ancestors have lived there. Everything, there's no reason for someone to come and take them out of their homes, okay? Nope. And they came and took them out of their home, and the news spread. And then the same week, during Ramadan, the holiest month of Islam, Islam is the religion of peace, and Ramadan is literally about peace. And in the holiest night of Ramadan, which is Laylatul Qadr, they go to Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the holiest mosque in Islam, and they then harass the people praying there, and they throw gas bombs in there, and they do all this crazy stuff, right? So this really just angers everyone. And that's what, right. And I mean, can you imagine Palestinians doing this to an Israeli, town or whatever? I mean,
to any Israeli or Jew watching this who does not see the issue there, I want you to consider how many synagogue shootings we've had on high holidays, when we get targeted on high holidays. Like, if you're excusing any of this, sit the fuck down right now. Sit the fuck down right now. Because this is completely unacceptable, and this is the shit that's happening. This is the shit that the right-wing nationalists are not only condoning, but participating in.
Right. And then after all this happens, Hamas sees it. And by the way, I am not a fact checker when it comes to the specifics of all this, so please don't harp on me. Hamas sees all this, and I think they shoot a couple rockets, or that's what Israel says, at least.
Yes.
And then Israel proceeds to just bomb the hell out of Gaza once again for the 100,000th time. And that's why we are where we are right now.
And let's make it clear again, because we said this at the beginning, but let's make it clear again. Yes, it is terrible that Hamas is sending rockets into Israel. Okay, there's no condoning that. The fact that Israelis right now are hiding in bomb shelters terrified is not okay. But again, Israel has bomb shelters. Palestine does not. Please get that through your heads.
And Hamas, we talked about this before the video too. Hamas is like, I mean, if Israel is so good at having all this intelligence, I know they should be able to find a few militants, right? And specifically target them, right? So this isn't really, when people literally sit there on the internet and say, well, Hamas shot rockets, so that's why all your people died, including children. That's completely false. I mean, Israel knows better to not shoot rockets at hotel buildings, buildings that have the media, all the journalists in them, just plazas, towns where people are just doing their thing as a normal society. I mean, they're trying, at least, because Gaza is not even livable. That's a whole nother topic, and that's kind of what makes this crazy and very frustrating for any Palestinian. Is the moment we start talking about this, there's just so many things to go over.
So many. And that's
But
the thing, that like this past week, people raising awareness for what's happening in Palestine is incredibly important. And it is incredibly important that people acknowledge that there's a huge disparity. But the fact is that when people share one thing that they've seen for like 2.5 seconds, and they don't take into account all of the other factors, even affecting the Palestinians, they're like, oh my God, stop all of the illegal evictions. And then don't talk about what he's talking about right now. Don't talk about the fact that they literally can't leave their homes. Don't talk about the fact that they literally, you were telling me about the boats and getting shot. They don't know anything because they don't experience this. All they say is, oh, bad, good. They don't actually look at bad because of, good because of. They don't go anywhere past it because they don't actually give a shit about us.
Exactly. They don't care about the details. They just want to, they care about
looking good on the internet.
Them looking right. And yeah, exactly. So, I think we touched up on the media propaganda thing, which is really, really freaking just insane. It's out of control.
The loudest voices are speaking above the people who actually care. The loudest voices are the extremists, is what y'all do need to understand. That you hear death to all Palestinians and death to all Israelis, but that's not what all of the people believe. In fact, that's not what most people believe. Most people who are scared for their lives right now just want peace. They want it to stop. They don't.
Isn't that funny? It's not funny, but isn't that ironic? Like, most of the time, the common person doesn't want violence, but yet it's what we're spoon-fed on the media and through the media all the time.
100%. Like I said, I grew up in a household where I was constantly told Arabs are worse. And I was like, that sounds stupid. I'm not going to listen. But I was still like, if that's all you're seeing, thankfully I was in America, so I actually got a more diverse perspective. But in Israel, everyone's separated. And they're literally, only Israelis are around Israelis. Sure, they see some Arabs around sometimes. But at the crux of the matter, they truly do and are raised to believe that all Arabs, all Muslims, all Palestinians want them dead. And that's why they hate them. But it's the same thing, like, that Palestinians think that all Jews hate them, but it's not true, but they're being told. And it's people don't take into account the propaganda itself and the fact that how much they're fed from a young age. They are told to hate each other because the right wing tells them to. And it's just fueling extra nationalism on both sides and hatred on both sides, causing people to justify the actions that the governments are taking. And again, before my words get taken out of context again, yes, it is very clear who has the power in this situation. It is very obvious that it is very imbalanced. We are not excusing the actions of the Israeli government in any way, shape, or form. Okay, white Ashkis. But literally, like, people don't, like, you were telling me that Palestinians are growing up with cement walls, barbed wires, no access to land, transportation, like, and then you have Israelis who are like, Palestine doesn't deserve to exist. And then you have Palestinians who say the same about Israel. And then you have people who aren't involved at all taking a side. And it's like, you don't get to delegitimize anybody.
Jews you're not the one struggling.
Exactly. This is like the thing that bugs me the most about what's been happening this past week is that people will post and then go on about their lives and not do anything else. They're going to post most of the time, usually imbued with some sort of misinformation, and they're going to go about their lives and not stand up for anti-Semitism, not stand up for Islamophobia ever. They don't care. And then there are the people who are even worse. They're only speaking on this issue so that they can be openly anti-Semitic and openly Islamophobic, but it's socially acceptable this time because they use the word Zionist or Palestinian, or even if they don't acknowledge the word Palestinian Muslims, because it's more acceptable that way. Because people are just using this like it, and it's, it is obviously, it's more than about religion. It's about culture. It's about preservation of culture. And people who want to take, that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a preservation of culture is what Israeli and Palestinians should be fighting for. And it has become now, with the governments just stoking hatred. No, I want to win. I'm right. Fuck you. Instead of, hey, because government as a whole exists to help the people. That is what the role of government is supposed to be. But instead of actually giving a shit about the people who are literally living and dying there, it's a pissing contest. And obviously the one with the bigger cock is going to win. That's a metaphor. It's literally the Israeli government and their giant Iron Dome and all the weapons that are funded by the US government. Although, to that point also, yes, right now it is important and always has been for us to question the amount of aid going to Israel from the US government. Yes, not questioning that. My issue is, why is that the only one y'all are focusing on? Let's look at the entirety of the military budget and think maybe we should talk about some other things too. Like, obviously, do not give this much money to Israel. No, absolutely not. But why is that your only concern with the military budget, people?
And that, Danielle, brings us to a very important point, which is the influence of the deep state and the Christian evangelicals.
So I love that you're talking about the deep state, but I don't think it's so deep. I think everybody's aware at this point. They just don't care. So yeah, there are people lining their pockets. 100%. There are people lining their pockets. But see, that's and I think we should touch on this part first, the both sides thing. People are like, "Oh, no, you can't say both sides." Kind of you can, but also it's a little deeper than that, because both governments are attacking each other and ignoring their people. Both sides of civilians just want to live. Both sides are more concerned with eradicating the other than taking care of their people. Yes, it completely matters that one side is more heavily fortified than the other, and that one side is pretty much living in an open-air prison. And it is important to know that Israel does provide aid to Palestinians. Nowhere near enough. They do provide aid to Palestine. And then you tell me, you and I were already talking about this, where the money goes.
Yeah, and shoo away. Sorry. So I actually didn't know that Israel sent any kind of funds to Palestine until you mentioned it, but I guess they do send a little bit.
Not enough.
I mean, it's I don't want to paint the picture like Israel's actually trying, because they're really not.
They're doing the bare minimum required to look good internationally.
Yeah, and this is something that actually I didn't really know about until I had people from back home, back in Palestine, tell me themselves. I used to say, hey, why doesn't the PLO, which is like the Palestinian police force, I think, or the government there, why don't they, help out the people more? Why don't they do this more? And they were literally telling me that the PLO, most of it is already kind of corrupt. And I hope that my words don't come back to bite me on that, because I don't know the current state of the PLO, but from the stories I've heard, the PLO treat Palestinian prisoners, which is their own people, like trash. Worse than, this is not my words, they treat them worse than the Israelis treat them in prison. So let that kind of sit for a little. The fact that I'm telling you that is really disturbing as a Palestinian. So that means that my police of government, or whatever you want to call it, the fact that they're treating me worse than my supposed enemy is really disturbing. Even though I know for a fact the Israeli government would do some crazy shit to me too. But that just kind of gives you an insight of the main problem here, Danielle, is corruption, right?
It is 100% corruption. And somebody is like, it's not actually both sides. So y'all do have a point. It's not both sides. It's way more than that. Because first of all, you have the government and the leaders on both sides. Then within that, you have the people on the right who are fucking crazy on both sides that are actually influencing everything. Then within that, you also have the human beings who are actually getting affected on this on both sides. But beyond all of that, that's just contained in Israel, Palestine. Beyond that, you actually have the outside meddlers too. You have the US, you have the UK, you have Russia, you have everybody else getting involved, trying to impose what they think is right on these two groups of people and on these two lands, because they care more about destabilization of the Middle East than they do about human lives, is the fact of the matter. And the civilians, honestly, yeah, it is both sides. You have Israeli civilians, you have Palestinian civilians. But the civilians shouldn't, it's not a side. No kids should be dying. 10-year-old Palestinians, they aren't Hamas. 10-year-old Israelis, they're not the IDF. They literally, they're like, what can I do? They hate that everything is going on, but they are so caught up in it because you have the government and the leaders, the right-wing extremists, the outside meddlers, and everybody just wants something else. Everyone has a completely different goal. The government and the leaders, more power, more money. The right-wing, power. Outside meddlers, money and power. And then the human beings, they just want to live, because the entire world thrives off of the Middle East destabilization. It always has. We have always been the target of the issues. If you like, we have always been the problem child. And they intentionally stoke our flames of hatred on every side, trying to say, you're the problem, you're the problem, you're the problem, without realizing they're the problem. They're the ones doing this. The back of the Israeli government is the US and the right-wing evangelicals.
Yeah, and also the world economy, for some reason they thrive on this conflict in a way. You can kind of see that today. We heard about the deal for the arms that America's sending Israel. I don't know how many millions or billions it was, but
Of course they are.
it's a business, you know. War is a business. This isn't new to us. So I think that kind of, you know, shows you that I like how you broke it down between, you know, there's the people that are struggling, the government, and there's just so many layers to it, because it's never that simple.
Yeah, and the corruption runs so deep that, and they thrive off so much destabilization, that you touched on this earlier, but from an Israeli perspective, there's a reason people fear our military, y'all. Like, literally, the IDF and Mossad could send in special agents to go get rid of the people who are actively causing this. The PLO, infiltrating the PLO itself would probably take a lot more people, but I'm pretty sure going up to individuals and slicing their neck is more effective at ending the actual problems than bombing a bunch of random civilians.
Which,
like,
by the
I
way,
don't condone violence, period, but like,
they do send those people, by the way, those secret agents you're talking about. They send them in little Palestinian towns, and they arrest kids and teenagers and adults, all the same, for ever speaking out against Israel, or maybe they were in a protest or whatever. They literally use those resources for things that are useless, that just create more violence and more hate.
it's like the police here. They use their resources to squash their protesters instead of actually helping the situation. Literally, the IDF could have Hamas squashed easily. Because y'all know where Hamas, like, what started Hamas, right? Like, that was definitely the US Army. Like, y'all are aware that it's the US military that started. They're the ones who gave Hamas weapons. So not only was the US providing stuff for Israel, they were providing stuff for their enemy in particular, making them an enemy.
Which the U.S. always does. The U.S. always does that. And people literally like glaze over it like it never happened. I'm like,
they literally did it in Iron Man 1. They literally did it in the first Iron Man movie. Like, not only were the military weapons getting sold to the government and the military, but they were also getting sold to the terrorists. But Tony Stark only had a problem with them getting sold to the terrorists, not the US military, which started in the first place. So it's like, y'all need to understand these things, that the right-wing fascism, the nationalism, is stoked from somewhere. And for some reason, y'all are able to understand that Americans are not the same as Trumpies, but Israelis are all Netanyahu bitches, right? That's apparently in your eyes what it is, which is some of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, because we just had 4 years to learn the lesson that the government is not always, and most of the time isn't ever, representative of its people. It's about who they want power from. We literally just had 4 years dealing with this shit, and y'all still can't figure it out enough to understand that there are people who actually care. Literally, like, again, no media coverage of the Israeli protests, but you know that the left is releasing its own media. They have found enough Israelis who are not extremists but still are celebrating Palestinian deaths. But I bet you, had they turned around and asked 2 more people around on the other side of the thing, they would have said something completely different. But were they going to ask them? No, of course not.
It's the typical media, reaction. Even we've seen it here in America as well. I mean, it's the same thing.
Literally, like, we've had fair prime ministers that have existed, but they get overrun with the right-wing extremists.
Right. That's quite telling too. I mean, even when you have the right people in place, it still didn't really make a difference, because the main driving force is always going to be the military, the people in the military, the people in the positions of power that make the shot callers and all this crap. Most of them are racist, or they have racist agendas.
Yep. And we have the example of it just happening right now. The next election is coming up, and instead of allowing themselves to be on a cabinet with a Muslim person, the right-wing group was like, no. And then suddenly the evictions happened. And it's like,
it's 2021, and they don't want to accept someone because of their religious identity. It's really sad.
It's despicable. It's despicable. And yeah, y'all, I'm literally Israeli. I understand that what Hamas is doing is bad. I understand the PLO is bad. I understand that shit. But if you can't understand that the government that has sovereignty over this land right now is completely corrupt, and we need to be calling out the corruption. My biggest issue, and I'm going to clarify this over and over, is the fact that so many people who aren't involved in this situation are so obsessed with it and making it their personality that in a week they aren't going to give a shit about. That's my issue, is that when people come in here and demonize everybody involved in the situation and demand we speak, demand our voices, and then don't even listen. It's like, y'all will take whatever stance is trending right now instead of actually doing the research to understand. We are aware the Israeli government is doing the wrong thing. But when y'all are listening to the propaganda that is saying it's all Israelis, it's all Zionists, when Zionism literally just means self-determination of the Jewish people, and allowing the right wings nut jobs to completely twist it, it's understandable if someone involved in the situation is an anti-Zionist. It's understandable if Palestinians are anti-Zionist, because they've never had it used against them. It's used in a way around them except violence. But for Jews, it is literally our way to say we need to have somewhere to be safe. And for people to weaponize that, and it's the fact that the word has been weaponized as a whole is anti-Semitic, because it literally just means our ability to find somewhere we can be safe and be openly Jewish. That's what it means. And for people to say every single Zionist is a terrorist, we've spent like 10 years, 15, 20 years trying to say you can't generalize people as terrorists because of the things that their government does. But to turn around and do it to Jews is fine. It's because this is a game to people. These are lives at stake. These are kids dying, innocent people dying. And people are more concerned with saying what's trendy, and they don't give a shit about the actual people. The Palestinians are dying, and they're like, oh, well, at least it's okay that Israelis are. Nobody has ever said that. Like, the fact that y'all are okay with this, it's just an excuse for people to be Islamophobic and anti-Semitic. And I'm going to say that over and over. Like, they're like, oh, I just hate all Zionists. Do you even know what Zionism is? Zionists don't inherently support the Israeli government. Yes, there are Zionists who support the Israeli government, but not every single one. It's they don't care. They don't care. They also don't care that Israeli citizens are fighting and protesting and hating this too. They only show the ones who are celebrating. just like for how long after 9/11 would constantly show Muslims or Middle Easterns celebrating anything bad that happened to America. And how long did we have saying that's propaganda, that's bullshit, that's not who they are? And they turn around and do the same to us.
See, oops, I'm just messing up everything today. Huh? Sorry. Okay.
We gotta talk about the evangelicals if you wanna.
I was gonna say, yeah. So I'm kind of an idiot, and my charger was forgotten today. So I have about 10% left here. So I want to go over two things, if it's cool with you, the Christian thing and the solution, right? Because that's what we're here for. We want to kind of propose a solution. We don't have the answers to everything, but we just want to kind of give our opinion on that. Guys, there are Christian evangelicals, which I like to call Christian Zionists, but I don't like to use the word Zionist now as much because Danielle kind of educated me on why it's kind of has a, I don't want to use it in like a derogatory way. But these Christian evangelicals that don't even align with the real Christian faith, I'm sure you guys have seen them in American politics. Pence, cough, cough. They literally use the Jewish name and the Jewish people to their benefit. And that's how, and this is kind of an opinion again, but in my opinion, that's the whole reason they wanted to create Israel in the first place. Besides the Jewish people's intention of wanting their own country and security, the evangelical Christians, they didn't care about that part. They just wanted to push their agenda to get their hands on the Holy Land and get their hands on some real estate, because that's what this is about, real estate. All the people, all these old white guys in political power, they literally only support Israel because they kind of fantasize about having land there one day and having land for their kids there one day, and they think that can't happen if it's Palestine for some reason, which is super
I really love how you're skirting around the issue and trying to be nice about it. If you want me to say it in
well, that's what you're here for. So
okay, I got you. It's really fucking simple. The evangelical nut job Christians, they fucking think that all the Jews returning to Israel is a sign of the end times. Israel getting attacked is a sign of the end times. And that once all the Jews are in Jerusalem, it'll trigger the rapture and Christians will be able to be in heaven living the way they want to. That's what it is. The evangelicals only support Israel because they want to trigger the rapture, and they do not support Jews. They will come and lecture us about our position on Israel. They're like, you have to support Israel and the government blindly. No, we don't. First of all, if you know anything about Jews, we don't listen when people tell us what to do.
Like the synagogue meme. Who?
Yeah, who? Like me, a Jew? Listen, Israelis are even more stubborn. Are you kidding me? Ha ha ha. No, we don't want y'all involved. Like, I saw this thing too that I was like, I feel safer around American Muslims who do not support Israel and who actively speak out against it than I do around American Christians who support Israel unconditionally, because at the end of the day, American Muslims actually don't hate Jews. The Christians don't give a single shit about us. And that's, again, the crux of this matter. Everyone getting involved wants us to hate each other because they do.
Yes, it's actually, it really makes, that's actually one of the things that really makes my blood boil, Danielle, is the fact that we have these Christian evangelical old white guys and women, no sexism here, they literally don't give a shit about the Jewish people or the state of Israel. They just care about their own agendas at the end of the day. So I think that kind of really ties that part up pretty well for people to
understand. Yeah, the thing is people are like, oh, it's not about religion. It kind of isn't, because at the end of the day, the religions that actually want to have a homeland there, because I mean, Christians have history there as well.
Of course, there's Palestinian Christians, guys. If you didn't know,
there's also Israeli Christians. But like,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there are. There are also Israeli Arabs. But and I think there's some Muslims who also identify as Israeli. I don't think there are that many for reasons, But at the end of the day, Christians want their foot in the Middle East. That's what it was. Just like I said at the beginning, the Palestinian solution, the Israel solution happened because the Brits in the US didn't want to deal with that Jew problem. They didn't want us. And the fact is that everywhere we were always othered. And I can tell you from personal experience that people will constantly ask me, what are you? The only place that I feel safe being openly Jewish would be Israel. Currently, I don't want to go to Israel, especially not right now. But I literally will get asked everywhere, what are you? The darker my skin gets, because I'm Sephardic, the darker my skin gets, the more I get fetishized too. Ooh, you, what are you? What are your parents? Where are you from? Oh my God, you don't look Jewish. Oh, you're really pretty for a Jew. Like, what does that even mean? Like in Israel, the intention of Israel is to be able to feel safe and be able to be Jewish. And instead, they're prioritizing their bullshit. You can have the self-determination for your people as long as it does not come at the expense of others. And people are suffering. People are suffering. Like, I cannot delegitimize the need for a state that protects Jews. In fact, from the beginning, it should have been, let's keep these people together and establish rules to make sure that everybody is safe. Because yeah, Jews were treated as second-class citizens, but then now they turn around and do the same. What kind of fucked up shit is that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the main, as a Palestinian, I do feel like it is my responsibility in a way to say this. And it almost makes me sick to say this because I think about all the Palestinians that have been killed and disenfranchised and been wronged, all the above. But as a Palestinian who grew up in America, I only know how to move forward my own way. And that's to leave the past where it is. And I know that seems really messed up to say to some people, and it might make me look like weak or whatever you want to say about me. But the only way in my perspective to move forward is to unify with our brothers and sisters, including Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Muslims, Israeli Christians, Israeli Jewish people, all the above. We all have to come together to move forward. I personally believe that a one-state solution makes more sense than a two-state solution because I don't trust Israel to have a two-state solution because
I don't either.
I mean, no matter what, eventually some right wing, if all the work, imagine we do all this work and it takes many years, and then one right wing guy comes along, kind of like Trump or Netanyahu or whoever you want to call it.
And starts expanding again.
Radicalizes everything. And then all of a sudden, the Palestinians still don't have an army. There's no way we're going to be able to fund such a big army, right? Because America will never support us because we're yellow, because we're a different skin color. Obviously, they don't care about us, and because we're Muslim majority wise. But we're always gonna lose in the end if there's two states, in my opinion.
As you because no one's gonna agree on the land ever.
Right. So one state solution to me makes sense because it actually holds Israel way more accountable than they are now, because then they have to be all inclusive. And if they're not, it's more of an example of of what you see now in America, which is like if the police, show brutality towards Black people, the whole nation can look at that and say, why are you treating these citizens any differently than you're treating us,
right.
For example. And that's kind of what I want to go towards as a Palestinian is an all-inclusive government that works just as one body. And to do that, obviously, we got to get the right people in the right positions of power.
155%. Like I used to go around saying, I figured out the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I figured out the whole crisis. You just stick all the leaders of the PLO, Hamas, Israeli government in a room together, and you take away their toys, their giant guns, and you're like, talk. The second they start saying something offensive, you squirt them with a water gun until they shut up. And then if they keep being offensive, then you just pop them in the face, shoot them in the head. Then it's like, okay, next. And suddenly we got rid of all the right wingers, and then we can actually have progressives take over. And it's kind of a joke, but it's kind of like, you kind of got to parent this situation. You gotta have everyone sit down, shut up, get their heads out of their asses, and actually move forward to help people. I also believe in a one-state thing because there's no way any of the land is going to be agreed upon. There's no way that anyone is going to be like agreeing on any sort of thing, and then always it's going to be one side has more than the other, one side has more than the other. And what needs to happen is that there needs to be representation of Palestinians, of Israelis, and within that, Palestinian Jews, Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Muslims, Israeli Jews, Israeli Arabs, Israeli Muslims, Israeli Christians. They all need to have a say. Everybody needs to have a say. The land itself being disputed over is like the fact that this is all about land when it should be about preserving our culture. That is why it is so frustrating that it has turned into this disgusting thing. And the thing is in my eyes, we could have one state that is called Israel by the Israelis, Palestine by the Palestinians. Everybody has a right to go everywhere and be free and live where they need to live. And then, if it's called Israel and Palestine, officially, if you want to change the name, it can be the Holy Land, the Fertile Crescent, Canaan, for fuck's sake. We can go back to Canaan. Like officially on official documents, it can be Canaan. If you're Israeli, you're still an Israeli. If you're Palestinian, you're still a Palestinian. There are so many ways to go about this. And obviously Jerusalem would have to be internationally recognized and regulated and everything, because Jerusalem is also placed to some of the holiest things in so many different religions. Israelis can't enter Bethlehem right now, but Palestinians can't enter Jerusalem. This shit needs to be handled. This shit needs to be handled internationally, because the problem is we need to say fuck the radicals. They're the ones who are having the loudest voices. They're the ones who don't give a shit about the civilians. We're the ones who want to say stop. Like, of course the Palestinians are violent right now. They've been disenfranchised for how long? Are people really expecting y'all to stay silent? But then again, are people also expecting that all the Israelis are quiet? I'm going to just say this. If you expect an Israeli to be quiet, you've got another thing coming. Netanyahu, you picked the wrong country to be a dictator of. Let's be honest here. But people will constantly demand shit and be like, you can end this. We're trying. It's not like we can call Bibi and be like, hey, let's do this now. If that were possible, Bibi would be on the Zoom call with us and be like, hey, can you give them their rights? God.
Yes, I mirror that. Netanyahu, he picked the wrong people to oppress, because Palestinians are extremely resilient, as you can tell, and we're extremely intelligent, and we have many, many different capabilities and many things that we can offer the world, guys. I mean, honestly, if Jewish people or I should say the Israeli people and the Palestinian people, if they came together, can you guys imagine what we could accomplish? And that's what they're afraid of, guys. They're afraid of us coming together and accomplishing a whole lot, really. I mean, it's a lot of anti-Semitic jokes about like Jewish people ruling the world and being so smart and having all this money and being, good business people and stuff like that. But it's funny, Palestinians have kind of been the same in the shadow. We're always great business people. We're very smart. We're everywhere in the world. Literally, you'll find Palestinians everywhere doing something with their life. So the fact that our peoples are so good at being a human being and just being such a blessing to anywhere we go, it's really telling. And it makes me even more pissed off that these Christian evangelical, evil, whatever you want to call them, the fact that they're coming in and they're pushing their agenda on us and making us hate each other more, it makes me sad, because I see all these radical Israelis and I kind of feel bad for them, because I see people that are just very nervous in their own hearts, and they're very confused about what it even means to be human, because they think that they have to stick together in a way of like survival and to hate and kill anything in sight that isn't them, it
they're
makes me feel
scared.
so bad for them. And it also makes me feel so bad for Palestinians that grew up their whole life seeing, radical Israelis come into their land and do all these crazy things to them. They think the Jewish religion is at fault for this, when it's really not. It's the person behind the religion. It's never the religion itself. Um, Guys, it's very simple. Me and Danielle are literally two very different people, and we're completely different race and religion, but yet we can come and agree that what is stopping us? What is stopping us from coming together? It's just it's really just frustrating, to be
It's
honest.
because what we need at the end of the day is we need we do need a government to exist that protects Jews, that outright protects Jews. We need a government that outright protects Palestinians too. You can't have the decolonization of Judaism. You can't have the de-diasporization of Jews without franchising and taking care of Palestinians as well. Without Palestinian liberation, we can't be free. Without Palestine being free, Israel can't be free. I don't
Exactly.
think y'all understand that. And the thing is we need a one governing body that has enough representation from everybody to make sure that everybody has explicitly said rights. Explicitly said. Because the reason Israel was created is because Jews needed a place where they could be safe, where it was outright written in the laws to be safe. But because we did that, now Palestinians aren't. We need some governing body that protects everybody there, that actually cares, that actually says, you know what, we're going to work together. And the protest, they terrified the governments. Why do you think they're doing all this shit now?
They're suppressing it.
They're suppressing everything.
They never bring those things to light. I mean, do you know how many protests around the world happened on Saturday? And I have not seen that anywhere on any news channels. I mean, all over the world, people were protesting for Palestine. But within Israel itself, you have Israelis that are protesting for Palestinians and protesting at the same time against their government that is led by Netanyahu, just a crazy person. And none of this comes to light because, they want you to see what they want you to see.
They want you to see the hatred. They don't want you to see the unity. They never want you to see the unity because then they'll realize, that's more important than anything else.
Yes.
If for a second they thought they couldn't control us through hatred anymore, that's when they would get scared. And that's the crux of it. Yes, Israel is 100% imbalanced in power and is 100% absolutely destroying Palestinians. But the Israeli citizens, the Zionists who believe Israel has a right to exist, that's not the government. And they are trying and they are standing up for what's right. And at the end of the day, all that we can do is say, we want rights for each other. We want love. We want peace. What you're doing is wrong. Stop. Okay? Like everyone keeps commenting on my stuff everywhere. Free Palestine. Okay, let's see if this works. BB, can you free Palestine now? We are trying. We are trying very hard. We are trying. And we understand how difficult it is to see all this shit happening. As an Israeli, I do not support what the government is doing. I am trying to help get Palestine free. I am trying my damnedest. But there's only so much that us as individuals can do. There really is. We can speak out against it, but obviously it takes more than a 1 to 3 minute video to do so. It takes so much. It takes so much knowledge. It takes so much work. And it takes people working together and being like, we are sick of the hatred. We want there to be love because this hatred is just going to stoke more hatred and more hatred and more hatred. And if we can stop it now and say, listen, we as Israelis support a free Palestine. We support the liberation of Palestine. And can actually get that out there to say, we as Israelis, us as Zionists, support a free Palestine. People don't understand that you can be a Zionist and support Palestine.
And Danielle, I have 1%, so I'm going to say, I love everyone that's watching this. Please do your part in sharing this video and helping us spread our message. It really would mean the world to get the right people the right voices heard. We can only do this with love, guys, and continuing to fight for justice. If anyone has, anything that they want to add to this, feel free to, to go ahead and comment or whatever you want to do for this video.
Message me. My socials will be here, possibly his if he wants.
Possibly.
Yes.
Danielle, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Of course, thank you. It's really funny, y'all. You don't even know this, but I had sent him a bunch of like messages on Instagram about this whole thing, and then he saw my story and commented, said, "We need to talk about this." Hadn't even watched my stories, and I was like, "Yeah, I just said that. I just said that."
Hadn't even opened the messages yet.
Yeah, you're like, we knew, because we love each other and we respect each other as human beings, and we know it's not our people.
Absolutely.
I love you.
We are united. I love you very much.
I'm gonna say in Hebrew, "Ani ohevet otcha."
And I'll say in Arabi, "Ma salama."
Okay, y'all. We love y'all. Please keep sharing resources to help Palestinians. Please keep sharing resources to call out the Israeli government, but please be wary of what you are sharing to make sure that it is going to help Palestinians and that it is actually criticizing the government, not the people. We love y'all. Free Palestine. Fuck Netanyahu. Right up the ass.
Netanyahu.
Yeah, fuck you, Netanyahu. Fuck you. This is coming from an Israeli. Suck my entire. No, you don't deserve it. Sorry. Mwah.
I hope my family forgives me for that if they ever forgive me.
I love you. Okay. Mwah.
Bye.
Oh, I should stop recording.